Your wife doesn't need you to have the perfect words when having a hard conversation. What she needs to know is that when something is difficult, you won't attack her, disappear and withdraw, or make her regret bringing her feelings to you. You see, most men do not fear the conversation that they need to have with their wife. They fear how they are going to respond and what they're going to do when they hear what she has to say. They are more scared of their own feelings in response or reaction to what they hear than they are of what actually needs to be addressed. They'd rather that their wife stays uncomfortable and hurt than them have to experience it themselves. This is why we avoid hard conversations as men. Nobody taught us how to connect with our own emotions, to have hard conversations so that we can be emotionally strong for our wives. Right? The conversation is not the problem. The energy that you hold, the identity that you carry with you entering that conversation, that is the issue. Because you can learn every communication technique in the world. You can research ChatGPT and Claude and all the rest of it for the best scripts to have a conversation with your wife. And if you enter that conversation as a reactive, avoidant, or defensive man, your wife is going to experience the energy that you carry, the identity that you hold, and how you show up way before she hears anything that comes out of your mouth. And this is what most men ignore. This is why they are avoidant. It's not because you don't have the words, it's because of who you are and how you handle conversations, right? When we're talking about difficult conversations that you need to have with your wife, the question is not, what do I say? We need to be asking ourselves before we get into the conversation, who am I when the conversation gets difficult? Because all the while it's calm and easy, we're good. As soon as it gets a little bit more emotional, that's when we fall apart. And your wife needs you to be strong for her, right? Because what your wife experiences when you react, when you avoid, or when you just defend yourself when she's trying to share her experience is something very different from what you intend your behavior to be. You might think that she's got the wrong end of the stick and you need to correct her. What she's experiencing is invalidation and a lack of care for what she has to say. You're subconsciously telling her that what is coming out of her mouth is wrong and she needs to change it in order for her to be accepted by you. She feels unheard. Because she is sharing how she feels, the way that you react and respond, it now turns into a debate as to whether or not she was right or wrong, whether she used the correct tonality, and she just gets torn apart. This tears her femininity down. So now she feels unsafe for being honest. She doesn't know whether her being honest with you is going to make you angry, withdraw, frustrated, silent. She's now playing a guessing game. She could be met with defensiveness. She could be met with withdrawal. She's got no idea what version of you is going to show up. So now she feels alone. Because a conversation that was supposed to repair the situation between you is now being avoided. It's now being brushed under the rug like it doesn't matter, and it pushes you further apart. This is that invisible gap and distance between you that keeps getting bigger. The final part to this in your wife's experience is she now feels responsible for the marriage and it getting better. Because she's got to identify all the problems. She's got to raise it. She's got to be the one to try and talk about it and make the conversation happen. She is pushing for a resolution because you don't. All the while you are there trying to engage with your own personal safety rather than with her, she's left to fend for herself. We talk about this deeply in my Primal Ascension and my inner circle, the elect, when it comes to dealing with hard conversations. And one of the common themes between the gents that I speak to is that they don't even realize what their behavior is when they get into these conversations, right? Many of the guys have fed back and said that they didn't even realize that their behavior was making their wife feel abandoned, making her feel unloved, invalidating her or otherwise. They had no clue that the avoidance of hard conversations was one of the biggest things that was destroying the relationship. It was tearing apart the connection. What we often find as men is that we have this impulsive, reactive nature where we need to respond. Think about that for a moment. Do you hold the identity that you have to respond to everything that your wife says? Because you take what she says personally. You create a narrative about what you heard. You interrupt her, you over explain, you correct, and then things start to escalate. What this turns into is you're listening for all of the reasons why you're being attacked rather than listening for her truth. Or do you avoid this stuff? Does it start to get a little bit uncomfortable when you turn into the avoidant? Hopefully this will just go away and blow over with time, right? You know that something needs to be addressed, but you completely delay it, repeatedly delay it. Push it back, we'll deal with that later. Oh, we haven't got time type attitude. So you just withdraw, you go quiet, you procrastinate, waiting for a better time, knowing that that better time is never going to come. Or perhaps you're a defensive man. I need to prove that I'm not wrong. I need to uphold my status and keep face in the relationship. You're the man who protects himself instead of trying to understand the woman that he says that he loves. You're entering this conversation with a shield and sword ready to fight, right? You're looking for the evidence in anything that she says that would justify your behavior. Not willing to take responsibility, not willing to take accountability, just wanting to fight to protect yourself. The irony in that is that means that your wife has to lose. She has to be hurt in order for you to be saved. So what really happens with any one of these three is that your wife brings you a problem into the relationship, but you experience it as the problem is you. It's an attack. So your self-protection takes over. We have to reverse this. If we're going to build connection into our relationship, if we are going to build a deep form of intimacy, a deep level of intimacy, then we have to start to shift the way that we show up in these conversations in a completely different direction. So what I'm going to do in the remainder of this video is I'm going to show you a real easy way where you can get any hard conversation on the table in a very safe capacity, safe for you, safe for your wife, the opportunity to have it or not have it, and everybody feel good. And do this perpetually. And I'll show you how you can go from avoiding every conversation into having an endless amount of possibility with the conversations that you can have and feel good about. What I want to introduce you to here is the invitation protocol. And this is the invitation, a framework that you can now take to your wife with any hard topic that you need. Right? Before we get into the specificity of it, I want you to think about these three shifts that you can start to consider. So the first one is when you think about the conversation that you need to have with your wife, when you think about what it's going to entail or how it might play out, I want you to question the story that you are telling yourself. What story are you making up about this conversation, about this topic? Right? This is separate from whatever happened or from what you fear might actually take place. What is the narrative that you're telling yourself? Is it that you feel your wife just always disagrees with you? Is it that she always disrespects you? That she's upset with you again? That you failed and that you're useless and you're unworthy as a man? It's that your wife doesn't want to talk about it, or that when she does, she only wants to attack you. She doesn't really want to resolve the conversation. She just wants to get at you. Right? What is the story and the narrative that you're telling yourself? Shift number one, question it. Why are you procrastinating? Why are you hesitating? Why are you defending this topic, this conversation? What are you telling yourself about it? Number two, rather than avoiding the conversation, prepare for it. Now, the invitation protocol that I'm going to go through is going to give you the best preparation to temperature check how this conversation may go way ahead of time. But in the first instance, we have to understand that avoidance delays the action indefinitely. And if we delay things indefinitely, it only gets worse. Whereas if we prepare for the conversation, then the preparation delays action intentionally. What does that mean? We're preparing to have the conversation. We're getting ourselves ready to handle it, and we're setting it up so that it's easy. Avoidance just means it's never going to happen ever. So the protocol is going to allow you to prepare to have a great conversation rather than avoid it because you feel uncomfortable. You don't have to enter every hard conversation immediately, right? You've got to be able to regulate yourself. You've got to be able to reflect on why the conversation needs to be had so that you can understand what you need to communicate, right? The preparation allows you to really get into the specificity of what needs to be dealt with. Avoidance doesn't. And the final bit with this is we're going to be turning awareness into action, right? Because most people think that just being aware that there is a problem or aware that there is something to deal with is enough to allow them to deal with it. It's not. Because if you have constantly avoided it, being aware of the conversation needing to take place or being aware that you avoid stuff doesn't lead you into a better alternative action. So we have to see that the old behavior, the way we hesitate, the way we avoid, the way we have handled old conversations, that's the learning opportunity. We learn from that and we choose differently. The preparation helps this, but this moves us into a positive action rather than a negative one. The majority of the time we go into hard conversations with a negative energy, with a negative identity, a reactive or a defensive behavior and attitude, and so it all goes wrong. So we have to prepare ourselves by learning from the past and ultimately doing it different. This is carrying that new identity into that conversation, right? How you handle the conversation and how you show up as a man in your marriage is determined by what you do next. Yeah, your wife doesn't care for your track record. She doesn't care for your bank balance. She doesn't care for your status. She cares about how you handled the last interaction. And so this will move you into the next best action for you to take, right? So let's really think about this, okay? Because going into this protocol, what you're going to do is I'm going to get you to literally detail out the steps and the framework that you're going to take, and we're going to do it here together as we go through the process. So you can literally leave this video and go through and start actioning the conversations that you have never been able to resolve, the hard conversations that you keep procrastinating about and avoiding. So what we need to start to look at, the change that this protocol is going to give you. You're going to go from being reactive to being composed. Your wife is going to be able to share with you what she needs to share with you without you reacting and losing your shit. She's not going to have to prepare to brace herself and guess what version of you is coming up, because this is going to give you a consistent, repeatable, action-orientated focus so that she can depend on you and rely on you. Right? That's going to build your confidence, which is going to allow you to stop being an avoidant and be intentional with how you handle these situations moving forward. Right? This is where your wife starts to trust you that you will handle difficult things, not just disappear into silence, because you will feel confident in doing it. This will diminish your defensiveness, and it will allow you to become curious in how you do what you do in the conversations. You'll be open to asking more questions. You'll be open to hearing her truth. You'll have time and space and capacity to listen to her deeply. This will change her experience of dealing with things with you. She will start to feel emotionally safe in your presence because the conversation was had. Right? Your wife will stop thinking things like, how do I say this without setting him off? And she will start to experience, like my wife does, is I can tell him absolutely anything and everything that is going on for me, and I trust that he will be there with me through the whole thing safely. That is emotional safety. And that is what this is going to enable you to do. Right? So that's a bit of context. That's why we're going to do this. So let's get into the actual protocol itself. And we're going to do this live. So if you haven't got a pen and paper, get it, write this down, take notes, because this is going to be game changing for you in the way that you handle situations and conversations from this point out. Now, I want to be clear. The reason that this is called the invitation protocol is that this is getting conversations that you have been avoiding on the table. It's setting your composure, it's setting your character for making the conversation happen. Let me be clear on what this is not, right? This is not how you conduct yourself in the conversation itself. The invitation protocol here gets you safe and comfortable in seeing if this conversation is going to be able to take place. I have a whole separate framework on what to do in the conversations. Right now, we are getting rid of the avoidance, we're getting rid of the procrastination and the hesitation. I'm giving you a framework that you can utilize in order to handle conversations far better. So, this is the protocol. Okay, this is the protocol itself. There are 4 components to the protocol, and we're going to go through each and every one. The 4-step process that this protocol lays out is for you to be able to invite your wife into having a difficult conversation in a way that she feels safe enough to do it. Right? She feels safe enough to have this conversation with you where that she never has before. The goal isn't to win the conversation. The goal isn't to manipulate her. It's not to extract or get what you want. The goal is to create conditions for this conversation to take place where honesty for both of you becomes possible. That is what we are doing here. Okay? The heart of this protocol is you are inviting her to say what she didn't feel safe enough to say the first time round. That is what we are achieving here. So there are 4 components. We're going to go through this one by one, but I'm going to overview them here and then we're going to work through. So what I want you to do is start to think about what are the conversations that you continually and repeatedly avoid with your wife? What are the things that you haven't been able to say? Because that is what we're going to use this protocol for. That is what we're going to get on the table. So start to write down, what is it that you do not tackle when it comes to hard conversations? What topics, what events, what circumstances have you left unresolved because you were too scared to handle it? And again, I go back to the beliefs that I said at the beginning, that you have been scared to handle or hold these conversations, not because of the topic itself, but because of how you're going to feel and how you're going to respond when you hear what your wife has to say. That's what we really and truly are scared of. So the 4 components of the protocol. Number 1 is a reference point, a timestamp. And the purpose of this is to anchor the conversation in a shared experience. Then we move to the prepare phase, so the warm-up. So the purpose of this, once you have the timestamp in place, is to speak into things that were covered in said event, timestamp, conversation, or otherwise, so that you're on the same page. Your wife doesn't feel blindsided or that you're springing something up on her and you've got an agenda. Number 3 is you're then going to expand on that and you're going to share something specific. This is the reason that you are bringing the conversation up. This is the reason that you are approaching her and speaking in this way, because it's the one specific thing that you want to address. Right? It's the thing that stands out for you that needs resolving, or the thing that you know she wants resolving because it's never been spoken about fully. And then the final part to this is the invitation itself. This is inviting your wife to share her perspective or talk to you more about said thing so that you get a deeper understanding of where she is or was with what went on. So that's what we're going to cover as we go through this. I'm going to expand on it and give you some examples and where this is really becoming powerful for the gents that I work with in the Ascension and also thereafter. So let me run through this, how this might sound on a very hypothetical level, right? So let's say that your wife is upset because you make sarcastic jokes at her. And let's say that just 2 weeks ago, you were having a conversation and you made another sarcastic joke and she absolutely lost her shit with you. Yeah, because you're tearing down her feminine energy. She feels undercut by you. She feels unloved by you, uncared for. All of this stuff is present for her. You don't want to face it. You don't want to bring it up because you know what she's got to say you're not going to like. So there's the scenario that we're going to deal with, right? So this protocol might sound like, hey, look, I was thinking about the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago where we were sat in the lounge and we were talking and I made a comment that really didn't go down well with you. You know, the conversation was absolutely fine up until I made that comment and then all hell broke loose, and quite justifiably, right? I've been reflecting on what I said, and the one thing that really stands out for me is I undermined you. You know, I said something really awful. That one comment around the way that you looked in that moment was not funny. And I know that that really hurt you. The thing that is stuck in my mind and that I feel awful about is I didn't care what you were feeling in that moment. I tried to brush it off as if it didn't matter. And I feel awful because of that. And so, if you were willing to, I would love to have a conversation around what I don't understand in the hurt that I caused you. You know, for the first time ever, as hard as it is for me to hear, I want to know how you feel when I said those things, because I know I've done it in the past and I want to stop. So, if you're open to it, I would love to hear your perspective. Right. So, then that's just a hypothetical how this all rolls together. But what you can see in what I did is the reference, it was the timestamp 2 weeks ago when we sat in the lounge talking, conversation, blah, 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 right? Pulling my wife back into the moment with me. It was a shared experience. So she's now going to be recalling where we were, what we were doing, how it was going. The prepare side of things, the warm up, we were talking about whatever it was, right up until the point that then I get specific. I made the shitty comment and it all went south and you really didn't like it. I added a feeling in there about how I feel. Now I reflected on it. I feel awful and ashamed that I made you feel that way, but I don't truly understand. And then in the invitation, I would love to hear your perspective and what it is that I really made you feel in that moment, because I tried to ignore it and I know that's not a good thing. So if you're open to it, I would love to hear and understand more so how you really feel. Right now, that's just a hypothetical example of how this all links together. The more specific these scenarios can be, the better, the more tangible it will sound. And it gives you clarity and conviction when you're bringing this up. Right. So we're going to go through this step by step. When you have, or if you have got a pen and paper, write shit down as we're going. Yeah. Be specific, map this out, and then you can do this over and over and over. So the first point, as I alluded to, is the timestamp and the reference. So you're anchoring the conversation in a shared moment, right? What most men tend to do is they go, oh, we need to talk. Like, that's fucking game over before you've even started. Yeah. Because you're going to put your wife's back up. She's going to feel like you're coming at her. She feels like you're going to blame her. She's expecting you to get really emotional and explosive or make it her fault, whatever it is that you want to say. So the more that we can bring her onto the same page as you, then you are standing in the same memory. Right? You're there together. It avoids confusion. You will have far less defensiveness from her as all of this unfolds. And she's going to feel more in tune with what you want to discuss, because it's allowing her to remember the moment that you are talking around. Right? If you were to say, oh, I want to talk about last week when I was at home, but you was out and I heard that you was talking to such and such. Right. So now she wasn't privy to the conversation where you've been informed about what was going on. So it's going to feel like an attack straight up. So we have to understand where she is when we're bringing this to her in relation to, is she on the same page as us or not? Right. The things that you must avoid when we do this is getting to the point too quickly. Right. If you go, oh, last week when we was sat on the sofa and you was just being really fucking horrible to me. Yeah, too fast. We've got into why we're bringing it up way too quick. Now it's going to feel like an attack. Yeah, we need to be a little bit softer, a little bit more open. We haven't even got to the warm up yet. We're just referencing the timestamp. The next one is being vague. So if you go, oh, last week when we was having that conversation, what fucking conversation, right? The last week is 7 days. There's 24 hours a day. There's a lot of times that we've had conversation. What one are you referencing? Or if you say, oh, that time that we was down the park and we was talking. No, right? Be specific. The more vague you are, the more likely she is going to push back on whatever it is that you're raising. And then the final one here is beginning all of this with any form of accusation or conclusion that you have made. Right? We're doing this to gain clarity and understanding. So if you start making accusations and you start jumping to conclusions, you're just going to get a huge amount of pushback. We are trying to create a environment and conditions where your wife feels safe enough to be honest. So make it feel safe so she can be honest. How you feel about her honesty right now doesn't fucking matter. Because you need to be willing to hear it first of all, right? The irony in this is if you won't let her be honest, but you want to tell her how you feel, then you're a hypocrite. because you won't hear her honesty all the while you want to tell her yours. Right? The anchoring of this is to get you back to the same moment so that you are starting from the same page and standing on the same ground. That is the timestamp. So write down some conversations, some events, something that hasn't yet been resolved. Just spend 30 seconds naming some things that you haven't addressed. Right? 2 weeks ago when you was at the coffee shop and you made a sarcastic comment, or 3 months ago when you was at a friend's house for dinner and you hung her out to dry in a social environment and you made a rude comment. Like, give the timestamp, be specific when it was, where you were, all of those things. Yeah. Get the timestamp, get the reference point solid. So we're going to write that down. Next up, then we move into the prepare. So this is the warm up, right? So this is when we start to expand on what it is that went on in that time referenced moment. This is where we have to start to show her that we were there with her, we were paying attention, we were there together, even though it was uncomfortable, right? You want to ensure that she feels that what you are going to raise or talk about, it's a positive thing to talk about. What do I mean by that? The more that she feels she knows what you are raising, the more positive the experience is going to be. Yeah, the things that you need to avoid here is things like having an agenda or a point to prove. As soon as she starts to get the air of, okay, you're gearing this up to have a go at me, she is going to withdraw. She's going to put her masculine shield up. She's going to fight you. The other thing to avoid is adding new perspective. Only speak to the things that were present in that moment and that shared experience. For example, if you were to say, you know, last week when we was down the park and we was walking around and talking, and we was talking about, you know, what the kids are doing at school and all this other stuff. But when I was talking to my friend Steve about it and we were saying this, that, and the other, what he thought was, right, so now you've brought a completely different perspective into the conversation. She wasn't privy to that. Now she's got no idea what you're going to say. So now her back is going to be up, right? So keep it really simple. Only reference things that happened when you were both there. And then finally, don't rush over this, right? No woman enjoys being caught off guard. She doesn't like it when you rush in, bulldoze in, and just lay it out on a table real quick with no understanding. It's going to send her into fight or flight mode. It's going to send her into survival mode. You're going to get a bad response. Yeah. No woman enjoys you going hard, fast, and dry when she needs warming up, right? So think about that. She's a lady, treat her like one, right? Understand that the warm-up brings you onto the same page. It brings her into this space of feeling safe in what you're going to raise and talk about, or that you want to talk about. Don't rush. Have a little bit of patience, okay? So take this moment to write down the details around that scenario and that situation. What you are trying to do here is establish the foundations to build connection and safety. So show her that you're on the same page as her, that you're a team if you use that language. Show her that you're there with her, not against her. Right? So this warm-up is really key. So again, if we're looking at this, it could be from a timestamp perspective. We could have it as, you know, last week, Tuesday after dinner, when we were sat on the sofa having a cup of tea, we was talking about, right? There's your timestamp, there's your reference. So the warm-up is we were talking about what the kids are doing at school, what the behavior that they're displaying. You know, little Tommy is getting in trouble repeatedly, and we were talking about the things that he's doing, what the teacher has reported back to us, right? So we're warming up the conversation. Yeah, we're warming it up. And so everything that you were discussing is there, right? And then we got on to the topic of what we're going to do about it, because he keeps getting in trouble, keeps getting detention, keeps getting all this stuff, right? And we need to do something about it. So we've warmed it up. Yeah, lots of different things that we spoke around. We're talking into them at quite a high level, but now there's substance. There is substance there. And so your wife can be agreeing with you, and she's like, yeah, we did talk about those things. Interested why you're bringing this up, but okay, like, yeah, I was there. I was talking with you. Like she's recalling the moment and reliving it, right? She's going to feel safer when you do this rather than, oh, last week when we were sat on the sofa talking and you said about Tommy being naughty at school and right. So immediately it just feels worse. Yeah, it feels worse because we're getting in there too quick, too fast, no context. She don't feel she's on the same page. It's not going to end well. Right, it's not going to end well. So now we've done that. We then get to be specific, right? Share the thing that you want to raise, the thing that you want to talk about. So this is where, again, we are talking to one point that we want to address. We are talking to one thing that we want to resolve that you have been avoiding. So this has got two parts, as I alluded to in the hypothetical example. The first is the one thing that you want to bring up and talk around. Number two is how you feel about the specific thing, and you use an I statement for that, right? So what we do here is we go, we're talking about what to do about his behavior. And the one thing that stood out for me is when I started to talk and share my suggestion, I could see you getting angry and frustrated. And you then went to share how you didn't agree and you got quite flustered and frustrated with me, and you said some quite horrible things about my take. And I understand that you have a difference in opinion, and that's okay. Now that I've reflected on that, I feel really bad and I feel almost like a failure as a father that you and I cannot agree on parenting for the benefit of our son, because ultimately he's going to miss out and I feel inadequate. I feel like I'm letting him down as well as you, and I don't like it. And it's even uncomfortable for me to say that. Right. So what I'm doing here is I'm sharing my truth. I'm sharing my feelings about the thing. But because I'm using I statements, your wife doesn't receive this as you attacking her. I feel ashamed. I feel inadequate. I feel like a failure as a father because I'm letting this happen. And we're not on the same page about it. I don't like that. Right? It's not about you said some really fucking horrible things and I can't believe you attacked my character and this, that, and the other. You can address that later, right? You can address that later. Let's get this topic that you are avoiding on the table. So the things that we have to avoid in this is making the feeling based on something that she said or did, right? So if you would say, I feel really frustrated as well that it's playing out because you always make it my fault, right? Game over. You're here to attack. You're here to blame her. Yeah. And if you don't like what she said and what she said was rude and awful, fine. Address it later. Bring that up separately. You'll be able to use this protocol to do that. Just deal with one thing at a time and make it specific and how you feel about the thing, not how you feel about what she did or said about the thing. Don't bring her into it at this stage. Okay. The second bit here is if you bring more than one point in, right? So if you say, I was thinking about, when we was suggesting what we could do for improving his behavior and you didn't like my suggestion. And then when I tried to say about what we could do at home, you didn't like that either. Or even my suggestion of what we could do at the weekend, you didn't like that either. Right. So now we're loading it up. Yeah. So now we're adding emotional pressure. Now it's like, I'm here to bulldoze over you and I don't care how you feel. Right. This is where we lack empathy. This is where we lack compassion, because now our point to prove and say the things we want to say has become way more important than how our wife feels with what we're saying. Yeah. Be a man of honor, right? Treat her like a lady. Treat her with care. Treat her with love. Treat her with grace. Control how you deliver your message. So when you own your experience, you can be clear, you can be specific, and you can be respectful. If you cannot be respectful to your wife, she'll never respect you, because you're teaching her that respect is not given in the relationship. Lead by example with this. Okay, so be specific. Don't let her actions, words, or otherwise be the thing that you're naming about your feelings, because it's not your feelings. Right? You're blaming her. So again, write down what's the specific thing in this topic, in this situation, in this scenario that you want to address. right? What is it that you want to address? And once we've got that, then we can actually open up and invite her to have this conversation, right? So, again, the final part to this, which is inviting her perspective, sounds something like, really didn't like what was said. And I felt awful because Tommy is now going to suffer because you and I aren't the same page. And I don't want to do this anymore. I'm ashamed that I haven't addressed this before, but I don't understand why we're not on the same page. Why are we not on the same page? Because it's now impacting him. So if you're open to it, I would love to hear, like, what is a priority for you in how we parent him and how do we get on the same page, right? How do we get on the same page? I know that we've got time either later on tonight after dinner or tomorrow morning when we've dropped the kids off at school. We could have coffee then. Which one is more beneficial for you? Which one is easier for you for us to sit down and talk later on today or tomorrow morning? Right. So what we're doing here is we're saying, like, if you're open to sharing your side to this, if you're open to sharing your truth, your feelings, your experience, then I know already that this time or this time is good. And so this allows your wife to feel like you're considering when is good for her to have this conversation with you. You're not just telling her that she has to have it with you and when she's going to have that, right? You're not fully dominating and controlling the entire process here. You're inviting her to be part of it now that you have said what you want to talk about and you would like to talk openly with her and everything else. Right, by giving her a choice, an A or B option, a one or a two, it's a real simple decision. She can go, well, tonight after dinner is just too quick, so let's do it tomorrow morning. Yeah, and she'll probably appreciate the way that you've approached this and the sheer fact that you are temperature checking if she is willing to have this conversation, right? So you invite her to share. In this moment, you're not going to be hearing much of the detail, but this is setting it up so that when you have the conversation, she's going to share with you how she felt, what was going on, what upset her, what she disagreed with, what her thoughts and perspectives are, because you've said, I want to hear or understand what you experienced, feel, what I miss, what I haven't heard before, whatever it might be. And you give her two options to confirm one. Now she feels, as part of the process, somewhat a little bit in control as well. It's not just being forced upon her. So the thing that you need to avoid here is making it feel like you're trying to get one up on her, right? So rather than saying, I'd love to hear your perspective, I'd love to understand what it is you haven't been able to say to me. If you're coming at it from the angle of, so then you can just tell me why you have an issue with what it is that I've said. Yeah, that invites her to be confrontational with you because she might not have an issue with what you said. She just has a difference of opinion. It's not that it's an issue with what you said. It's just she has a different idea. So when you come at it from that angle of, well, you can just tell me why you didn't like my suggestion, you're inviting conflict. Yeah, because it's very direct. It's very, you can tell me why, right? That's not very open. You're not inviting her to share her feelings. You're basically forcing her to tell you why she's got an issue with you. It's just going to be confrontational. She will immediately feel like you're only doing this to make her feel small, right? You're trying to get something. The second, again, is getting upset if she says no, right? So if your wife says, well, actually, no, I don't want to talk about this, handle it with grace. That's okay. I understand this is a conversation that we've never been able to have up until this point. So I understand this probably feels a bit uncomfortable. It's okay. Like, I don't mind that you say no. What I'll do is I'll leave it for a week and then I'll come back to you and see if we can go try again. Accept the no, right? Don't fight her, because if you really and truly need to resolve this issue, then accept the no. Now, the great thing with this, before I get into that, actually, write down how you might phrase the opening, how you might actually piece this all together, right? So phrase it that way and have that detail and that clarity. And then you get to practice, right? You get to practice. It could be loads of different situations, right? So I'll just do another one just as an example. It could be, 3 months ago when we was at the park with Tommy and Sally and Jimmy and everybody else, and we were stood over by the swings and we were just talking. And the conversation went from us talking about the kids and school and whatnot. And then we got onto the vacation later in the year topics, and it all was really good. And then we started to talk about where we might go next year. And the conversation went south really quick. And the one thing that stood out for me is when we started to plan way ahead, future plans, there was a lot of disagreement in where our thoughts were about what was good and what was not. And it caught me off guard. And if I really sit with it, it made me very uncomfortable because I think for the first time ever, I realized that we're not on the same page as to where this family is heading. We can't even have a conversation around what next year looks like without fighting. And deep down, I felt ashamed. Ashamed that I have let our relationship get to the point where we can't plan a future together peacefully. And it's really sat with me and it's made me uncomfortable. It's even uncomfortable talking about it now. So I would love to hear your perspective on why that happened. Why do you feel that we can't talk about anything past the end of this year? Why do you feel that there is that resistance there? Because it was so evident. I know that we're busy today, but over the weekend, we've got some time Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon where we haven't got the kids with us. So which of those would be better for you for us to sit down and have that conversation? Because I really want to understand. Right? Like that's how this flows together. Right? That's how this flows together. And hopefully, as I'm saying it, you can see how it all pieces together and it builds the clarity, it builds the momentum in a direct but soft way. It's not rushed, it's not harsh, it's not coming at it with a dagger, but it is getting to the point. It's softening up the ability and the capacity to raise what needs to be raised. Now, let's say worst case scenario, your wife says, no, I don't want to talk about it. And you go, okay, that's fine. Like, I understand it's a difficult conversation. We've never been able to have it. So I get that. I get that. I'll leave it a week and then I'll come back to you. Right. So we need to address it. But I understand right now is uncomfortable. So guess what? In a week's time, we go back to the beginning. We be a man of our word. A week later, we go to our wife and we say, hey, look, I know last week when I raised the topic of conversation around us not being able to plan the future, when we was sat on the sofa talking about it. And I said I'd leave it a week. And the one thing that stood out for me over the course of this week is that we can't even talk about talking about the future. So let's park the conversation about let's park the conversation about the future. Let's have a conversation, if you're open to it, about why we can't even talk about it. Right? It's really shown me that there is a lack of security or safety in the conversations that we can have. And I don't want that for us. I know we've got time now or later on tomorrow after lunch where we could sit down and talk about it. Which one would be more beneficial for you? Right. So again, we're using the protocol and the framework to take the timestamp of we tried to raise a conversation and then it didn't work, i.e. she said no. So now we just go back to the beginning. And we use the framework to raise the conversation, i.e. the timestamp and the point of, well, I raised it and we weren't able to have the conversation. So I said I would bring it back up and bringing it back up, but let's leave the topic of discussion for the moment. I want to understand why we can't even talk about these things. How have we got so far apart that we can't even talk about stuff, right? Now, let me talk into what's actually happening here. Yeah. So when we've got the whole process in play, you've got the 4 steps here. Your ability to go through this process, not rush, timestamp, warm up, be specific, ask for her perspective and put the invite out. When you do this, there are so many emotional components, masculine and feminine, going on that it will largely take your wife by surprise. It will feel better, but it will feel weird, especially if you have been reactive and avoidant or defensive, right? Because this is the complete opposite. You're being proactive, you're being direct and assertive, and you're also being soft, gentle, and open in your receptibility to doing it. You're doing the complete opposite to what she is used to. So it's probably going to feel a little bit awkward and strange. But this is also showing her that you are changing how you show up for conversations. So this is an identity shift. You're no longer the man who comes to these conversations angry, aggressive, reactive, defensive, going to withdraw and fold and collapse. You're now the opposite. You're a man who's actually dealing with it. You're a man who's handling it. You're a man who is stepping in and tackling all of the pain of the past, whether it is recent or otherwise. When you use it in the loop, i.e., she says no to having a conversation and you bring it back up again, now you're showing a proactive nature and persistence of resolving conversations that you've never been able to resolve. Right. So there's a little bit of a caveat now comes with this, because if your wife has constantly said that she wants things resolved and you start to use this protocol to bring things up proactively and she always says no, well, now you've got your new timestamp. Right. So what I mean by that is, let's say that you bring a specific topic up 10 times in a row and she says no every time. You're giving it 3, 5, maybe 7 days in between. So you've spent 10 weeks trying to bring up this topic and get it resolved, and she's repeatedly said no. You've never kicked up a fuss, you've never rejected it, you've just been patient, taking your time, knowing that emotional security has not been present. And this might be her first occurrence of feeling your consistency, your openness, and everything else in a safe manner, right? You now get to bring it up again, use the invitation protocol, and you get to say, hey, look, I've noticed that over the last 10 weeks, every time that I've tried to bring up the conversation around X, Y, or Z, it's always been met with a no. And I can understand that because, in the past, I'd always be reactive or defensive. I'd always shut it down. I'd always make you feel uncomfortable. I never would give you the time of day to listen. So I understand all of that. The one thing that is now apparent to me is it's either not that important for us to address things, or there's a bigger issue at play that I am not aware of. And I don't know what it is. And it's now a major concern for me because you have always said to me that I never resolve things. And for the last 10 weeks, I have proactively changed all of what I'm doing to resolve things. And you've said no every time. So if you're open to it, I would love to hear what's really going on. Because it's either things aren't important to resolve, or I am not aware of something deeper and bigger, and I want to be aware. I want to understand. This has shown me that there is something wedged between us that is keeping us apart. And I'm not going to do it anymore. So I know we've got time either later tonight or tomorrow morning where we could sit down and have a good couple of hours talking about this. I would love to hear what's really going on from your perspective. Which one is better for you? Right. So now this gets rid of any form of victim mentality of, you see, you ask me to tackle things and resolve things, and when I try to bring it up, you don't even speak to me, you won't even get the conversation on the table. We don't need to play that game. Right? We don't need to play that game. The framework does the heavy lifting for us. All we're doing is going through every single time, step by step. We're not getting reactive. We're not getting defensive. We're not avoiding. We are following the process. So now we get to call the spade, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Many of you, when you do this, you're going to be shaking in your fucking boots. Your emotional control is going to reach a new level and a new threshold. And that's great. That's a great learning opportunity for you. The purpose of this is allowing you to find confidence in speaking your truth and having a protocol that you can fall back on to keep you consistent and persistent, right? Because let's say you do this 10 weeks in a row Your wife now cannot say to you that you're not consistent. She cannot say to you that you're not proactively trying to resolve things. She cannot say to you that you're handling things the way you've always handled them. So much has changed. And that is what she is asking for. She's asking for you to be different. She's asking for you to repair the relationship. She is asking for you to no longer defend, no longer react, no longer avoid. This protocol knocks them all out. It knocks them all out. Right? So go back over these 4 steps, rewatch them, write them down, be specific, really lay out anything that you have avoided doing, go through the process. Right? Go through the process. The great thing with this is as you get comfortable with it, as you get confident with it, as you can deliver it with conviction, it won't sound robotic. The process, the framework, you will find your flow and your uniqueness with it, and it won't be as robotic and strategic as this. Right? Sometimes the warm-up will be really elaborate. Other times it'll only cover 2, 3, maybe 4 points. It'll be more concise. The timestamp, you'll be able to bring it up, whether it was last week, last month, last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you will be able to recall things. And you'll also find that as you talk about stuff, it will bring up timestamps that you haven't even thought about. So you'll be able to have an endless opportunity to be proactive with conversations. The specificity allows you to share your feelings. It allows you to get to the point and stop skirting around the edges of what really needs to be discussed. And the final invite side of things, it allows you to include your wife in a decision-making process about when the conversation is going to take place. She's not just hearing it from you like a tyrant on it has to happen in this particular way. So this protocol allows you to really start to shift and change what is going on in the dynamic between you and your wife. It allows you to be proactive in ways that you have never been before, right? This allows you to shift your identity from being that avoidant who pussyfoots around the truth and doesn't bring up the hard conversations and get straight to it. Yeah. You don't have the perfect words, but you're now becoming that man where your wife doesn't feel attacked. She feels that you can have a difficult conversation with her and she's not going to regret it, or she's going to bring things up and then you're going to disappear, right? None of that is going to take place. You are also going to start to develop the conviction in yourself to confidently have these conversations. That layer of confidence is going to come in. So you're no longer going to fear how you will respond to what she raises. You're going to know because you're there in the moment, right? So I have a whole other framework of what to do in the conversation when you are there. So there'll be another lesson opportunity for you in that. But the biggest thing here that I want you to take away from this session is understanding that this is about your identity. Yeah, the conversation and the topic is not the problem. How you enter it is. And this invitation protocol allows you to enter the conversation. You're temperature checking where your wife is. You're staying in control. You're not being reactive. You're not being defensive or avoidant. You're getting to the point. And you're seeing yourself be calm, be composed, so that when it does get difficult, you know you can do it. You know you can have that hard conversation. New skills, new experiences, it will bring new outcomes. So if you've enjoyed this, then there is a link below to further extend your learning and understand how this invitation protocol builds into a bigger, wider program, which is my Primal Ascension. So if you've enjoyed how this lays out and you want to understand how it fits into the bigger ecosystem, then click that link, check out that video, and it'll explain how all of this comes together. So how you shift your identity, how you build confidence through your effective communication, and then how you actually develop leadership and direction into the relationship so your wife doesn't have to be the masculine leader anymore. And it allows you to completely shift the dynamic between you both. So you take charge, you take lead, and she feels like you're meeting all of her needs. You understand where she is, what she's going through, and she is the man that you can rely on. Right. So just as a final reminder, with this invitation protocol, the goal is not to win the conversation. Right. The goal is to create conditions where a honest conversation can take place, where honesty becomes possible. Because your wife does not need you to have all the perfect words. She doesn't need you to enter every difficult conversation having the ChatGPT fucking golden script. She just needs to know that when things become difficult with the truth that she needs to share, that you won't attack, you won't disappear, and you won't defend yourself at her expense. Right? You'll be able to stay calm and grounded. You'll be able to listen, hear her, allow her to be understood, seen, and heard. And you'll be able to then lead the conversation somewhere different like you have never been able to do before. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope this allows you to shift your identity. Again, the link is in the show notes below in order to extend your understanding of how this fits into the bigger ecosystem. And if I've said anything that gives you hope that change is possible for you, there's also a link to book a consultation with my program advisor to see if the Primal Ascension can take you on a radical journey of transformation to be the man who saves his relationship and restores trust into his marriage in 90 days or less. Hope you've enjoyed this one. See you on the next.